What you are about to hear is a work of fiction. The people, places, and events depicted in this story are products of the author's imagination or used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual individuals, living or deceased, or to real situations is purely coincidental. These stories may explore themes of crime, injustice, and human suffering. While fictional, they reflect real emotions and difficult truths that some may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised.
You forgot about one little clause, didn't you, Richard? Denise's voice rang clear across the mahogany-paneled courtroom, her words cutting through her husband's smug confidence like a blade through silk. Before we go on, consider subscribing to the channel to be notified as new stories are published. Please let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to know just how far our stories reach. 6 months earlier, Denise Whitmore had believed she was living a fairy tale. At 35, she had built her boutique interior design firm from nothing into one of the most sought-after residential design companies in the city. Her portfolio included million-dollar homes, luxury penthouses, and even a few celebrity estates. She had worked tirelessly to establish her reputation, often putting in 14-hour days to perfect every detail of her clients' dream spaces. Her marriage to Richard Whitmore, founder and CEO of Technova Solutions, had seemed like the perfect partnership. They had met at a charity gala 5 years ago, where Richard had been captivated by her intelligence and creative vision, while Denise had been drawn to his ambition and apparent devotion. Their wedding had been featured in 3 lifestyle magazines, and their sprawling suburban mansion was a testament to both their success and their supposed happiness. The house itself was Denise's masterpiece, a blend of contemporary elegance and warm comfort that had been photographed for Architectural Digest. Every room told a story of their life together. The gourmet kitchen where they had once cooked together on lazy Sunday mornings, the home office where she had cheered him through late-night business calls, and the master suite with its panoramic windows that had once framed their shared dreams. But lately, those dreams had begun to feel more like mirages. "I'll be in Seattle until Friday," Richard had announced that Tuesday morning, barely looking up from his phone as he straightened his Italian silk tie. At 42, he still maintained the athletic build that had first caught her attention, though she noticed he spent more time at the gym these days, and less time with her. "Another client meeting?" Denise asked, trying to keep the disappointment from her voice. It seemed like he was always traveling now, always somewhere else when she needed him most. "You know how it is. The Portland expansion requires constant oversight." His kiss goodbye was perfunctory, landing somewhere near her cheek rather than her lips. "Don't wait up if I'm late getting back." Denise had nodded and smiled, the same understanding smile she had perfected over the past year as Richard's absences became more frequent and his explanations more vague. She told herself it was the price of success, that building an empire required sacrifices. She had made plenty of her own sacrifices for her career. Why should his be any different? That afternoon, while reviewing fabric samples for the Henderson Mansion project, Denise's phone buzzed with a text from her sister Patricia. "Coffee tomorrow? I have news about the Morrison case." Patricia Caldwell was everything Denise wasn't, sharp-edged where Denise was diplomatic, confrontational where Denise was collaborative. As a senior partner at Morrison, Blake & Associates, one of the city's most prestigious law firms, Patricia had built her reputation on being ruthlessly thorough and fiercely protective of her clients. She was also fiercely protective of her younger sister. The next morning, they met at their usual spot, a small cafe tucked between 2 high-rise office buildings downtown. Patricia arrived precisely on time, her red hair pulled back in a severe chignon, her charcoal gray suit impeccable despite the early hour. "You look tired," Patricia observed, studying Denise's face with the same intensity she brought to depositions. "Richard's been traveling more. I'm just adjusting to having the house to myself so often." Denise stirred her latte, avoiding her sister's penetrating gaze. "How often is more?" He's been gone 3 days a week for the past 2 months, sometimes 4. Denise shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. It's business. The company is expanding. Patricia's expression sharpened. Denise, I've been practicing law for 12 years. I know what legitimate business travel looks like, and I know what it doesn't look like. When was the last time he actually told you specific details about these trips? The question hung in the air between them. Denise realized she couldn't remember the last time Richard had mentioned specific clients, particular meetings, or even which hotels he was staying at. His explanations had become increasingly generic: client issues, expansion meetings, investor relations. I trust him, Denise said quietly, but even as she spoke the words, she felt their fragility. I know you do, but trust doesn't mean you have to be naive. Patricia leaned forward, her voice gentle but serious. Remember what I always told you about that prenup? It works both ways. Denise did remember. When Richard had first brought up the prenuptial agreement, she had been hurt and confused. Why would someone who claimed to love her want to plan for their failure? Patricia had insisted on reviewing every clause, negotiating terms that Richard's lawyers had initially resisted. The infidelity clause, Patricia had explained at the time, means that if either of you cheats, the innocent party gets 50% of all marital assets, regardless of who brought what into the marriage. His lawyers hate it because it essentially nullifies most of the other protective clauses if he strays. Richard would never, Denise had started to protest. Probably not, Patricia had agreed. But if he does, you'll be protected, and if you ever do, which you won't, he'll be protected from you. It's fair. Now, sitting in the cafe with her sister's words echoing in her memory, Denise felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. That evening, alone in her pristine kitchen, Denise found herself staring at the credit card statements she had never bothered to examine closely before. Richard handled most of their finances, and she had been content to focus on her business while he managed their investments and expenses. But now, with Patricia's questions fresh in her mind, she began to notice patterns that made her stomach twist with growing unease. There were charges at expensive restaurants in cities where Richard claimed to be meeting clients, but always for 2 people. There were purchases at high-end jewelry stores, flowers, shops, and boutique hotels. Her hands trembled as she calculated the timeline. The charges in Chicago coincided exactly with Richard's supposed meetings there. The romantic dinner at Le Bernardin in New York happened on the same night he had called her, claiming to be exhausted from a difficult day of presentations. The most damning evidence was a charge from Tiffany & Co. for $8,500, made just last week while Richard was supposedly in Portland. Denise hadn't received any gifts recently, not for her birthday, not for their anniversary, not even for the successful completion of her biggest project to date. She spent the next 3 hours going through 6 months of statements, creating a timeline that painted a picture she desperately didn't want to see. The pattern was unmistakable. Expensive gifts, romantic dinners, luxury hotel suites, all purchased during Richard's business trips, none of them shared with his wife. When her phone rang at nearly midnight, Denise jumped, her heart racing. "How's Portland?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Exhausting," Richard replied, and she could hear the fatigue in his voice, though now she wondered if it was from business meetings or other activities. "The investors are demanding more detailed projections than we anticipated. I might need to stay an extra day." "Of course," Denise said automatically. "Whatever you need to do." After hanging up, she sat in the darkness of their bedroom, surrounded by the luxury they had built together, and felt more alone than she had ever felt in her life. The next morning brought no relief from her growing suspicions. Every interaction felt loaded with double meanings. Every explanation seemed hollow. When Richard called to say he would be late returning, Denise found herself analyzing the background noise, listening for clues about where he really was. That afternoon, Patricia called with an invitation that felt like a lifeline. "Dinner tonight? My treat. There's something I want to discuss with you." They met at a quiet restaurant downtown, far from their usual haunts. Patricia had chosen a corner table where they could speak privately, and Denise noticed her sister had brought a small notebook. Never a good sign when Patricia was in lawyer mode. "I did some research," Patricia began without preamble. "Technova Solutions has no clients in Portland. Their expansion plans, according to their public filings, focus on the East Coast market. They have no business interests anywhere in Oregon." The words hit Denise like a physical blow. She had suspected, but hearing the confirmation made it real in a way that credit card statements couldn't. "There's more," Patricia continued gently. "I have a friend who works in corporate intelligence. Very discreet, very thorough. If you want to know what's really going on, she can find out. But Denise, once we open this door, there's no going back. Are you prepared for what we might find?" Denise thought about the empty house, the increasingly distant husband, the gifts she had never received, and the growing hollow feeling in her chest where trust used to live. "Yes," she whispered. "I need to know." Patricia nodded and made a note in her book. "I'll set up a meeting with James Morton. He's the best private investigator in the city. Used him in several high-profile divorce cases. If Richard is hiding something, James will find it. And if he's not, if I'm just being paranoid, then we'll know that too, and you can work on rebuilding trust. But Denise, your instincts are usually good. If something feels wrong, it probably is." The meeting with James Morton took place 3 days later in his downtown office. Morton was not what Denise had expected. Instead of the stereotypical gruff ex-cop, he was a soft-spoken man in his 50s with kind eyes and an air of quiet competence. "I want to be very clear about what this investigation might uncover," Morton explained, his voice gentle but direct. "If your husband is having an affair, we will find evidence. That evidence might be painful to see. Are you prepared for that possibility?" Denise thought about the lonely dinners, the empty bed, the growing distance between her and the man she had promised to love forever. "I'm prepared," she said firmly. "Good. I'll need access to credit card statements, travel itineraries, phone records if possible, and any other documentation you can provide. My fee is $500 a day plus expenses, and most investigations of this type take between 2 and 4 weeks. Patricia leaned forward. "James, I need this handled with absolute discretion. If Richard is innocent, we don't want any damage to his reputation or their marriage. If he's not," she paused meaningfully, "well, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it." Over the next 2 weeks, Denise felt like she was living a double life. During the day, she maintained her normal routine, meeting with clients, overseeing installations, managing her business. But every evening, she found herself checking her phone obsessively, waiting for updates from Morton. Richard's behavior during this period only reinforced her suspicions. He was more attentive when he was home, bringing her flowers and cooking dinner, but it felt performative rather than genuine. He also became more secretive with his phone, taking calls in other rooms and keeping his device face down when they were together. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening when Richard was supposedly in Boston for investor meetings. Denise was working late in her home office, finalizing designs for a new client, when Richard's laptop chimed with an incoming message. He had left the computer open on the kitchen counter, something he never did anymore. Denise knew she shouldn't look, knew that checking his messages would cross a line they could never uncross. But the notification preview was visible on the screen, and what she saw made her blood run cold. "Can't wait for our weekend in the mountains. I've missed you so much, see?" With shaking hands, Denise opened the laptop. Richard hadn't logged out of his email, and the message thread with someone named Chelsea revealed months of intimate correspondence. The messages were explicit, romantic, and devastating in their casual cruelty toward Denise. "She suspects something," Richard had written just 2 days earlier, "but she's too trusting to actually do anything about it. I just need to keep up appearances until the Portland deal closes, then I can file for divorce and be done with all this domestic nonsense." poor little wife, Chelsea had replied. At least the prenup means she can't touch your real money. You're so smart to have protected yourself. Exactly. She'll get the house and whatever's left of her little design business, but the serious assets are untouchable. I'll be free to start fresh with you, baby. Denise read through months of messages, each one a knife to her heart. They had been meeting for 8 months, initially just occasional encounters that had escalated into regular rendezvous during Richard's supposed business trips over the past 2 months. Chelsea worked as Technova's marketing director, and they had been using company resources to fund their relationship. The worst part wasn't the sexual content or even the cruel comments about Denise. It was the casual way they discussed her future, as if she were a business problem to be solved rather than a human being whose life they were destroying. She'll be fine, Richard had written. She's got her little interior design thing. She doesn't need the big money anyway. This way, everyone gets what they want. Denise screenshot every message, her hands steady despite her racing heart. Then she forwarded everything to her own email account and carefully closed the laptop, leaving it exactly as Richard had left it. When her phone rang 20 minutes later, she wasn't surprised to see Morton's number. Mrs. Whitmore, I have some information. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? I think I already know what you're going to tell me, Denise said quietly. But yes, let's meet. The next morning, Morton's office felt like a war room. Photographs, documents, and timeline charts covered every surface. Morton and Patricia flanked Denise as she absorbed the magnitude of her husband's betrayal. Chelsea Rodriguez, 28, marketing director at Technova Solutions, Morton began, indicating a professional headshot. They've been involved for the past 8 months, with the relationship escalating significantly over the past 2 months. Hotels, restaurants, weekend getaways, all charged to company credit cards or your joint personal accounts. He slid a folder across the desk. But here's where it gets legally complicated. Our forensic accountant discovered that Richard has been charging personal expenses related to the affair to Technova company accounts. While he probably didn't think of it as stealing, wealthy executives often blur these lines. Legally, it's misuse of corporate funds. Patricia leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. How much money are we talking about? Conservative estimate? Around $100,000 over the past 8 months. Luxury hotels, expensive gifts, first-class flights for Chelsea to meet him in various cities, all charged to the company and categorized as business expenses. The spending has doubled in the past 2 months as their relationship intensified. Denise felt a mix of anger and disbelief. Richard had been so focused on hiding the affair from her that he'd carelessly exposed himself to serious legal problems with his own company. There's more, Morton continued. Based on the email correspondence you provided, Richard is planning to file for divorce within the next month. He believes the prenuptial agreement will protect most of his assets. But it won't, Patricia said grimly. The infidelity clause nullifies those protections. If we can prove adultery, which we can, Denise is entitled to 50% of all marital assets, regardless of what the prenup says about separate property. Morton nodded. And given the misuse of corporate funds, Richard could face legal consequences. His business partners and the board won't be pleased to discover he's been charging personal affairs to company accounts. It's a serious breach of fiduciary duty, even if he didn't intend it as theft. Denise looked at the evidence spread across the table, photographs of Richard and Chelsea together, credit card statements, hotel receipts, email printouts. It was overwhelming and damning and absolutely conclusive. What happens now? She asked quietly. Patricia's smile was sharp as a blade. Now we file for divorce and trigger the infidelity clause. Richard thinks he's been so clever, but he forgot about the one provision that could destroy him financially. And the corporate fund misuse? I have contacts in the district attorney's office. While this might not rise to the level of criminal embezzlement, Richard clearly wasn't trying to steal money he already had. It's still a serious violation of corporate governance. The board will likely force him out, and there could be civil penalties. That afternoon, Patricia filed the divorce papers. The legal language was dry and formal, but the implications were explosive. By triggering the infidelity clause, Denise would be entitled to half of Richard's considerable fortune, including his Teknova stock options, investment portfolios, and real estate holdings. Richard didn't receive the papers until he returned from his latest business trip on Sunday evening. Denise was waiting in the living room when he walked through the front door, his face tanned and relaxed from what she now knew had been a romantic weekend in Napa Valley with Chelsea. "What the hell is this?" Richard demanded, waving the divorce papers. His usual composure had vanished, replaced by a mixture of shock and rage. "It's exactly what it looks like," Denise replied calmly. "I'm divorcing you for adultery." "Adultery? That's ridiculous. You can't prove." "Actually, I can." Denise set a thick folder on the coffee table between them. 8 months of evidence, Richard. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills, photographs, email correspondence, and my personal favorite, detailed financial records showing how you've been charging your affair with Chelsea to company accounts. Richard's face went white. He opened the folder with trembling hands, his confident facade crumbling as he saw the extent of the evidence against him. This is a misunderstanding. I can explain." "Please don't." Denise stood up, surprised by how calm she felt. "There's nothing to explain. You made your choices, and now you'll live with the consequences." "The prenup protects me," Richard said desperately. "You can't touch the serious money. You'll get the house and your business, but that's it." Denise smiled, and for the first time in months, it was genuine. "Actually, Richard, there's one little clause you seem to have forgotten about. The infidelity provision that Patricia insisted we include. Remember? The one your lawyers tried so hard to remove?" She watched as understanding dawned in his eyes, followed quickly by panic. "If either spouse commits adultery, the innocent party receives 50% of all marital assets." Denise continued. "That includes your stock options, your investment accounts, your real estate holdings, everything. The prenup that you thought would protect you is about to destroy you." Richard sank into his chair, the papers scattered around him like the remains of his carefully constructed life. "There's also the matter of the embezzlement charges," Denise added quietly. "The district attorney is very interested in your creative accounting methods." The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal proceedings and media attention. News of Richard's corporate governance violations and the divorce scandal made the business pages of every major newspaper. Teknova's stock price plummeted as investors worried about leadership stability, and Richard's business partners moved quickly to distance themselves from him. Chelsea lost her job immediately when the affair became public, and found herself unemployed in an industry where workplace scandals could end careers. The romantic texts she had sent were leaked to the press, painting her as unprofessional and reckless. The divorce proceedings were swift and decisive. Faced with overwhelming evidence of his infidelity, Richard had no choice but to accept Patricia's settlement terms. The corporate board forced his resignation and demanded restitution for the misused funds, effectively ending his control of the company he had built. On a crisp October morning, Denise found herself at the final board meeting where Richard's resignation was formalized. She wasn't there as a victim, she was there as a major shareholder, having received significant Teknova stock as part of her divorce settlement. "You forgot about one little clause, didn't you, Richard?" she said as she took her seat at the boardroom table, her voice carrying clearly across the polished conference room. Richard sat across from her, his expensive suit unable to hide the fact that he had lost control of everything that had once defined him. The board meeting was brief but decisive. Richard's resignation was accepted, and the company moved forward under new leadership. His reckless mixing of personal and corporate finances had cost him his position, his reputation, and his marriage, all for an affair that had ultimately meant nothing. But for Denise, the real victory had come months earlier, when the divorce settlement was finalized. The infidelity clause had worked exactly as Patricia had intended. Richard's betrayal had cost him half of everything he had worked to build. Denise used her settlement to expand her interior design firm nationally, opening offices in 3 major cities and hiring a team of talented designers who shared her vision for creating beautiful, meaningful spaces. Patricia left her corporate law firm to become Denise's business partner, establishing the legal department for their rapidly growing company. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Denise stood in the lobby of her latest project, a luxury hotel in downtown Seattle that she had designed from the ground up. The space was everything she had dreamed of creating: elegant but warm, sophisticated but inviting, a place where people could feel both pampered and at home. Patricia joined her, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. The Seattle Times wants to do a feature story about the hotel design. Apparently, you're being hailed as one of the most innovative commercial designers on the West Coast. Denise accepted the champagne and looked around at the space she had created. The marble floors gleamed under carefully positioned lighting, the custom furniture invited guests to linger and relax, and the art collection she had curated told a story of the city's rich cultural heritage. "It's funny," Denise mused. "Richard always said my little design business wasn't serious money. Now it's worth more than Technova ever was." "That's because you built something real," Patricia replied. "Something based on actual talent and hard work, not stolen funds and lies." They clinked glasses as the setting sun painted the lobby in warm, golden light. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Denise could see the city stretching out before them, full of possibilities and new beginnings. "To sister love," Patricia said with a grin, "and to the power of reading the fine print. And to never underestimating what a woman can accomplish when she stops believing the lies people tell her about her own worth," Denise added. As they watched the last rays of sunlight fade into twilight, Denise reflected on how much her life had changed. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed her had instead freed her to become the person she was always meant to be. Richard's attempt to discard her had backfired spectacularly, and she had emerged stronger, wealthier, and infinitely happier than she had ever been during their marriage. The prenuptial agreement that Richard had insisted on as protection had become the weapon of his own destruction. And the sister who had always had her back had helped her turn a devastating betrayal into the foundation for a brilliant future. In the end, Denise thought as she sipped her champagne and planned her next expansion, the best revenge truly was living well and being smart enough to read the fine print. Thank you for listening until the end. If you enjoyed the story, please consider leaving us a like. This helps us reach more people.